Today we're tackling something, really personal, I think, for everyone. How your childhood experiences might be shaping your romantic relationships now,
Yeah.
maybe without you even realizing it.
It's definitely a big one. We're essentially looking at the hidden blueprints, the ones laid down way back then that affect how we connect as adults.
Exactly. And we've got this great stack of articles, research notes that you shared with us to guide us through it. So our mission today, let's go through this material together, pull out the really key insights.
Yeah, help you listening, uncover maybe some of those patterns, see where they came from.
And figure out what it all means for you and your connections.
It's about bringing those early influences into the light, isn't it?
Yeah.
Seeing how they play out in adult love.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The material kicks off by really hammering home that childhood is this absolutely critical period.
Oh, completely. It's the foundation. Those first years, that's where we learn the basics, right? How to communicate, how to trust.
What love even feels like, giving it, receiving it.
Yeah, and even how our bodies react to stress. We absorb all this stuff, mostly from our caregivers, the whole environment we're in.
And this process creates something the material calls relational templates. Sounds important.
It is. They're like unconscious mental blueprints. We build them from those first connections.
And then just carry them forward.
Pretty much. We use them unconsciously to navigate relationships later on, especially romantic ones where things get, intimate.
So it's like our childhood installed an operating system for relationships. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. And maybe the biggest framework for understanding these templates is attachment theory.
Ah, Bowlby and Ainsworth. Okay. This connects those early interactions with caregivers directly to patterns we see in adult relationships, right?
Exactly. It's foundational stuff. Their research basically mapped out 4 main attachment styles, and it all comes down to how responsive or unresponsive our caregivers were.
Okay, let's break those down using what's in the material here. First up, secure attachment.
Right. This usually comes from having caregivers who are pretty consistently available, tuned in, loving.
And the result?
Well, the insight is that kids who form a secure attachment tend to grow into adults who, fundamentally trust others. They find it easier to have healthy emotional intimacy. They feel safe connecting.
Okay, makes sense. Then there's the anxious style.
Yeah, this one often stems from caregiving that was inconsistent, like sometimes warm, sometimes distant or unavailable.
So what does that look like in adults?
It can lead to this real craving for closeness, but, and this is the tough part, it's often paired with a huge fear of abandonment, always worried the person will leave.
Okay, number 3 is avoidant.
Avoidant attachment, yeah. This is often linked to caregivers who are more distant, maybe rejecting of bids for comfort or closeness.
But the child learns.
To rely only on themselves, essentially. So as adults, they might keep emotional distance, really struggle with vulnerability, with letting people get truly close. Intimacy feels threatening.
And the last one, disorganized.
This style is often connected to more difficult childhoods, maybe trauma, neglect, abuse, or a caregiver who was frightening themselves.
And the impact.
It's really complex. You see conflicting desires like desperately wanting connection but also being terrified of it. It can lead to confusing behavior in relationships, a real internal struggle.
Wow. And the big takeaway the material emphasizes is that understanding your style isn't just like interesting trivia.
No, not at all. It's a powerful tool. It helps you see your patterns, recognize your triggers, those things that set off big emotional reactions.
And understand what you actually need in a relationship underneath it all.
Exactly. It gives you a language, a framework for that self-awareness, which is always the first step to changing anything.
Okay, so moving beyond the styles themselves, this material really zooms in on parents as our first role models for relationships.
Absolutely. How our parents showed affection, how they handled disagreements, set boundaries, even just how they talk to each other.
That was our first lesson.
Our most powerful lesson, yeah, on how relationships work or how we think they should work, what to expect from people close to us.
And the quality of that modeling matters hugely, obviously.
Oh, definitely. The material draws a contrast between, say, emotionally available parents, the ones who are responsive, and parents who are maybe more controlling or critical or just neglectful.
And those differences wire us differently.
Seems so. You might see someone from a critical home become a people pleaser, always needing validation. Or someone from a neglectful one might withdraw emotionally as an adult, to protect themselves.
And it's not just how they treated us, it's also what we saw between them.
Yes. The material points out that witnessing a loving, respectful partnership actually increases the odds you'll seek out something similar later. You sort of absorb the script for it.
It becomes your normal.
What feels familiar, what feels safe, even unconsciously.
Now, here's something I found really interesting. It's not always the big, dramatic stuff. The material talks a lot about the subtle impact of emotional neglect.
This is so important. Because emotional neglect isn't always obvious abuse. It's more about an absence.
An absence of what?
Like consistent emotional attention, validation, comfort, that feeling of your caregiver being truly attuned to your emotional world. It's about what wasn't there.
And the consequences of that absence can be really significant in adulthood.
They really can.
Yeah.
The material lists things like finding it hard to even know what you're feeling, let alone express it. This deep, nagging sense of being unworthy or too much.
Avoiding real intimacy.
Definitely. Struggling to trust a partner, to really lean on them. And often, the material says, people internalize this inner voice that just constantly whispers, my needs don't matter.
Wow. That inner voice could really sabotage things.
It shapes your expectations, your behavior, often without you even realizing it.
Okay, shifting gears a bit to something maybe more overt. Childhood trauma.
Right. And trauma here means things like abuse, witnessing violence, abandonment, serious, scary experiences. These leave really deep imprints.
And the material details how these show up later in relationships.
Yeah, common patterns include things like hypervigilance, just constantly scanning for danger, feeling on edge.
Even when things are safe.
Exactly. Also, big swings in attachment, either intense anxiety about connection or deep avoidance of it. Emotional numbing is another one, kind of shutting down feelings to cope.
And sometimes repeating old patterns.
Sadly, yes. Unconsciously finding yourself in dynamics that feel similar to the original trauma. It's complex stuff.
It sounds incredibly heavy. But the material does mention trauma-informed therapy.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely hope and paths toward healing. Acknowledging the impact is step one, but healing is possible.
Now, parents are huge, obviously.
Yeah.
But the material also brings in siblings. Their role gets overlooked sometimes, doesn't it?
Totally. Siblings are our first peers, really. It's a whole different dynamic than with parents. They teach us about sharing.
Fighting.
Yeah. Conflict resolution, competition, cooperation. It's a training ground.
And the notes suggest these sibling roles can echo in our romantic relationships later.
For sure. Think about birth order, maybe. Oldest siblings might be more used to caretaking or being dominant. Youngest might learn to please or follow.
Only children.
Maybe fiercely independent, but could struggle more with sharing space or compromising. These dynamics with our first equals can definitely show up again with partners.
So arguing over the remote with your sister was actually relationship practice.
In a weird way, maybe. It's another layer of learning how to navigate connection with someone on your level.
Beyond family, we also learned about love just by watching the world, right? The material links this social learning to love languages.
Right. We soak up how people around us show affection and express care. If your family's main way of showing love was, say, doing things for each other.
You might default to acts of service.
Exactly. Which connects directly to Dr. Gary Chapman's 5 love languages: words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, quality time, physical touch.
And the point is that our learned language might not be our partner's.
Precisely. Understanding your own default, the one you learned growing up, and figuring out your partner's is key. It prevents so many misunderstandings that just come from speaking different learned love languages.
Yeah, you just assume everyone feels love the way you do.
It's powerful early conditioning, that modeling.
This material also gets into gender roles. How the messages we got as kids about being a boy or a girl affect our relationships.
Oh, massively. From day one, there are all these subtle and not so subtle messages about how boys should be and how girls should be.
And these stick with us.
Deeply. The notes give examples, like boys often being discouraged from showing vulnerability.
Which can lead to adult men struggling to express emotions.
Right. Or girls maybe being praised for being passive or putting others first.
Potentially leading to codependent patterns.
Exactly. The key insight here is recognizing these gender scripts we learned
Yeah.
and consciously deciding which ones are actually helpful or harmful in building a balanced, authentic relationship.
It takes real effort to unlearn that stuff, doesn't it? It feels so ingrained.
It really does. Until you shine a light on it, it just feels like part of who you are.
Okay, another significant childhood experience mentioned is bullying.
Yeah, and the impact of bullying can be really long-lasting. The material talks about internalized shame, a deep fear of rejection, low self-worth carrying into adulthood.
How did that play out in romance?
You might see someone avoiding closeness, like keeping partners at arm's length to avoid getting hurt again. Or maybe they over-apologize constantly, seek tons of reassurance.
Or misread things, like
Or-
assume their partner is critical when they're not.
Exactly, because they're sort of braced for that rejection. Healing from that involves slowly, carefully rebuilding trust in themselves and in others.
The material also covers parental divorce or separation.
Right, and this can bring its own set of specific challenges for kids as they grow up. Maybe a fear of commitment, seeing long-term relationships as likely to fail.
Or the opposite, idealizing love.
Yeah, searching for this perfect fairy tale romance to avoid the messiness they saw. Some kids also step into caretaking roles, trying to manage parents' emotions, and that pattern can stick.
But it's not always a negative outcome, the notes say.
No, definitely not. With support, many kids from divorced families actually develop really high emotional intelligence, resilience. They might have a stronger appreciation for healthy relationships because they saw what didn't work. So challenges, yes, but potential for growth, too.
Okay, then the material kind of zooms out to look at broader influences like culture and socioeconomic factors.
Which is crucial context. Culture shapes so much views on marriage, family duty, how emotion is expressed or not expressed.
And money stress.
Yeah, socioeconomic stress in childhood can impact parenting consistency, which loops back to attachment. And cultural taboos, say around certain identities or expressing vulnerability, can make authentic connection really hard.
So it's not just our immediate family bubble.
No, it's this whole complex web. We need to be sensitive to those wider influences.
So after digging into all these roots, all these impacts, the material logically shifts to, well, what do we do about it? Healing and change. Specifically, inner child work.
This is the empowering part, really. Inner child work is about reconnecting with that younger version of yourself, the unmet needs, the feelings that got buried.
Why do that? How does it help now?
Because understanding and sort of nurturing that inner child helps you see why you have certain subconscious patterns in your adult relationships. It lets you consciously choose differently.
Okay, so how do you do inner child work? What does the material suggest?
It mentions a few things. Reparenting yourself, giving yourself the compassion or validation you didn't get. Therapeutic journaling can be huge for exploring memories and connecting them to now.
Anything else?
Somatic therapy is focusing on the body to release stored trauma. And couples therapy, working through how both your histories play out together.
And the goal is changing those old brain pathways.
Essentially, yeah. Rewiring for healthier emotional responses, it's definitely work, but it's about conscious transformation.
To make this feel more real, the material gives a few snapshots. Maria, Jamal, and Tara.
Right. Maria's story is about learning love was conditional, leading her to be a people pleaser with that anxious attachment, always needing reassurance.
And Jamal.
Distant parents, so he struggles with intimacy as an adult, has that avoidant style, finds closeness threatening.
And Tara's is the hopeful one.
Yeah, she saw toxic stuff growing up, but actively chose to break the cycle through therapy. Her story shows that even with a tough start, awareness and healing can lead to secure, happy relationships. It shows the different ways these things manifest.
Okay, so for you listening, how do you start noticing if your childhood stuff is impacting your relationships now? The material gives some signs, some red flags.
Yeah, things to look out for, like a fear of abandonment that feels way bigger than the situation warrants, or that persistent feeling of just not being good enough.
Sabotaging good relationship.
Or finding it incredibly hard to say what you need or feel. Getting super anxious if a partner doesn't text back right away.
Always falling into the caretaker role.
Yep. Or noticing you repeatedly pick partners who are emotionally unavailable, echoing maybe an early dynamic.
Those are really concrete things to notice.
Yeah. And just noticing them without judgment is that huge first step. It opens the door to making different choices.
Speaking of which, the material gives some practical strategies for overcoming these patterns.
Clear, actionable stuff. First, therapy. especially someone trained in attachment, trauma, inner child work. They can really help you dig into the roots.
Mindfulness is mentioned too.
Yeah, practicing mindfulness helps you catch those automatic reactions as they happen. It gives you that split second to pause and choose a different response, not just run the old program.
Communication, obviously.
Yes, but it's crucial. Sharing your fears, needs, your history with a partner when it feels safe enough that vulnerability can actually help build trust and rewire things.
Setting healthy boundaries. That sounds key.
Absolutely. Learning to say no, protecting your own well-being, spotting red flags earlier. It's about creating relationships based on respect, not old, unhealthy dynamics.
And the last one here, reframing limiting beliefs.
This is about tackling that negative inner voice, identifying those core beliefs like, I'm unlovable, or my needs are too much, challenging them, and consciously replacing them with more compassionate, realistic ones. Changing the internal script.
Okay, the material wraps up with some common questions people have. First one, can childhood really affect who you fall in love with?
The answer seems to be yes. The material suggests we're often unconsciously drawn to dynamics that feel familiar, even if they weren't healthy. It's like seeking a feeling of home, even if home was complicated.
What about someone who feels they had a great childhood but still struggles in relationships?
That's a really good point. The material acknowledges that while caregivers are huge, other things matter too. Peer relationships, bullying, cultural messages, later life experiences. It's not always just about parents.
How can someone figure out their attachment style?
There are quizzes, like the adult attachment inventory mentioned, but working with a therapist skilled in attachment is often more insightful. They can help you see patterns you miss yourself.
Big question. Can you actually change your attachment style?
Yes, the material is really clear and hopeful here. Through self-awareness, emotional work, therapy, and importantly, having positive relationship experiences as an adult, you absolutely can shift towards more security. It takes effort, but change is possible.
How can partners support each other through this kind of healing?
The material suggests being a good listener, being non-judgmental, respecting new boundaries, being consistent and reliable that builds trust, and just encouraging their partner's growth.
And one last clarification. Are childhood patterns always negative?
Not at all. That's a key point. Positive childhoods feeling loved, safe, valued, build an incredibly strong foundation for healthy, secure adult relationships. The influence goes both ways. It builds strengths too.
That's really important to remember. Okay, we have covered so much ground here.
We really have. I think the core message from all this material is pretty clear. Yeah, your childhood creates these powerful emotional blueprints. They definitely shape your adult relationships.
But, and this is the crucial, but they aren't your destiny. You're not locked in. The power comes from awareness, from understanding where it comes from, and then taking those steps towards healing, towards growth.
You really do have the capacity to build something different, something more secure, more fulfilling. The past doesn't have to dictate the future.
So as you think about everything we've talked through today, attachment, neglect, siblings, culture, healing, here's a final thought to maybe chew on. How might understanding your own childhood blueprint change how you see the actions, the reactions, the patterns of the people closest to you right now?